Thank you for watching. My name is Glen Morgan, and this is We the Govern. And again, in the studio with me today are another video here with Representative Walsh. I'm so honored to have him in the studio. Our good representative from the 19th Legislative District, the first Republican elected there a couple years ago, in many, many years, and who has been a leading champion for freedom and liberty, not just in Olympia, but around the state. If you've been an activist here, you've traveled around, you've probably seen Representative Walsh. And thank you so much for being in the studio with me again.
There's a lot going on, Glenn. It's good that we're getting the word out to everybody about what this year looks like it's going to be.
It is, and I know the last video that we did, we were talking about this red wave election, just the dynamics of what that represents. And one of the thoughts is that it really looks like, for the first time since probably 1996, that the Republicans have a distinct and even reasonable expectation to believe that they'll have control of both the Senate and the House, which has led to, I mean, not that that's easy, not that it's guaranteed. There's a lot of things that can go wrong between now and then. I mean, I know Republicans tend to snatch defeat from the jaws of victory at every opportunity. Nevertheless, that's how I get the sense just when I'm out there, and I know we've talked about this before, but this has really set up an unusual situation here in Washington State for an unusual grassroots project that's come along. And it has to do with initiatives to the legislature and what that means. And this is, I think this is going to be probably one of the first videos we've really discussed this project because it's very recently launched. So do you want to tell our listeners a little bit more about this idea? Because you and I have both kind of volunteered to discuss some of these things and come up with some of the ideas, helping make some of this stuff happen. But so let me know, tell our listeners about this situation and why it means something.
It means a lot. To give it a simple kind of metaphor, think about football, American football. In football, a good quarterback leads the receiver, throws the ball not to where the receiver is, but where the receiver is going to be in a few steps. And when you see in football that works perfectly, that quarterback makes that pass and that receiver just receives the ball in stride and just runs down the field when it works. And in our state, in our government, as it should be, the people are the quarterback. And legislators like me, we're the receiver. We take instruction from the people and run with it, we hope. So what we have been working on is a package of initiatives to the legislature that will guide Olympia and will really show the legislators and the governor and all of them what the people want in terms of policy in this state.
To fix a lot of the problems that we've seen over the last few
years. We'll get into
the
detail there, but the big problems, homelessness, crime, the abuse of executive emergency powers, a whole bunch of things. Right. But let's talk first about what is an initiative to the legislature. It's under state law, it's a kind of alternate to the more well-known initiative to the people. If you think about the traditional initiative process, $30 car tabs, things like that. Those are initiatives to the people. The mechanics of the two types of initiatives are similar, certainly in the early stages.
Right.
You have to generate petitions and gather signatures of Washington voters in support of either type of initiative. Generally, it's these days, currently, you need to gather something like 350,000 signatures. And you generally want to gather more because there's some checking for duplicates and people who don't really live in the state. Right. So you need to gather those signatures. You can't do it online. That's another important thing to point out. There are online petitions, but a real Washington initiative can't be online. Right. Has to be paper and ink. Has to be ink, yeah, what they say, a wet signature, a real signature. Right. And people generally know this process. From years of car tabs and other reforms, where you'll see people at the store with a clipboard and a petition there, and you can sign it, or at the fair, or whatever kind of public event. So in the early stages, both types of initiative are like that. You have to gather the signatures. Right. The difference starts when you've gathered enough signatures to qualify the initiative. The more traditional initiative qualifies and then goes on the next general election ballot at the next November opportunity.
So like this year, that would be, you'd have to, I know the deadline's in July, and so
Right.
you'd have to collect the 400,000 signatures just to be as a round number.
Right.
I think it's 325,000 is the statutory
But you
requirement.
want to round up.
Yeah, you round up, and so they would have to turn in, say, 400,000 signatures by July, and then it would go on the November 2022 election. That's initiative to the people.
The initiative to the legislature goes a slightly different route. Still have to gather the same signatures in the same way, but then if you qualifies,
A longer period of time.
a different
December.
deadline.
Yeah,
the
December,
deadline is
yep.
at roughly the end of the calendar year versus
Right.
the middle of the year. If you gather the signatures by that time, then the initiative goes to the legislature in Olympia like a bill and gets voted on like a bill by the state House and the state Senate. And then if they both approve, if they both, the Senate and the House, vote yes on the initiative bill, it becomes law without the governor's signature and is not subject to the governor's veto.
And that's a big deal right now under
It
the
is.
current climate, because if the Republicans are able to get control of both the House and the Senate, I know one of the arguments that activists have told me before, grassroots people, oh, what's the point in electing, there's no point in voting, no point in voting for Republicans, because even if they get in there, Inslee's going to veto whatever they send him.
And there's a lot to support that.
Correct, because he's been a
the
veto-happy...
governor vetoes a lot of stuff,
Right.
sometimes even his own side stuff.
Right, I mean, he's been an incredibly veto-happy guy. So that's not an unreasonable concern. But what this does is this provides, at least in theory, if you had some really good initiative ideas that people cared about, and they got them and got through this whole process and handed them to the legislature in January of 2023, presumably with a Republican majority or a freedom-oriented majority in both houses, that they could sign it into law, and Inslee can't do a thing about it. He can't.
That's correct.
Can't
Could
veto.
not veto them, they would become law.
Right.
Now, if the legislature doesn't approve of the initiative to the legislature, there's still a chance. It then goes, like the other initiative, to the people for a vote,
Right.
but not till later.
Till 2023.
It would make the 2023 general election in our
Right.
scenario. So there is still a backstop.
Right.
If the legislature doesn't do the right thing, the people still get a final say, but it takes some time.
And, with this as a backdrop to this kind of policy sort of unusual opportunity or unusual set of circumstances, I should say, that's lined up here, with this idea that's been out there, I know it's kind of a grassroots-driven idea, there's been a PAC that's set up called Let's Go Washington PAC, sponsored by Brian Heywood. You're required on the public disclosure rules. I'll link to it down below if you want to find more information about him. But because he has more than 80% of the money, you're required to identify the primary sponsor, and that is funding this effort. But it's not paying signatures gatherers. This is a grassroots effort. If you were paying signature gatherers, it'd be just a huge amount of money and bring in all the other drama related to bringing in signature gatherers, but it's actually getting grassroots people to the supplies, the support, the infrastructure they need to get out and collect these initiatives. And,
Signatures on the
or
initiatives.
collecting the signatures for the initiative sheets, so they can get to that magic 400,000 number. And it's not just one, but it's a series of them.
It's a group of 11
Right.
initiatives that we are going to present to people as a package.
Right. And when you say we, I mean, it's as a volunteer. I mean,
It's an interesting combination of different groups. The center piece, the main engine, is the Let's Go Washington PAC that you
Right.
mentioned, run by Heywood. But there's also Restore Washington, which is
which is also
a grassroots
Yep.
social media organization run by a lot of people, but kind of prominently run by a former legislator, Kerry Condata, and a local Republican Party officer in Central Washington, Mike McKee.
Right.
They have their group. There are a couple of others. There's a group kind of born of the Tea Party movement called the Washington Tea Room. They're involved in it. So there are a number of
volunteers.
grassroots groups that are joining together. And one of the challenges in grassroots politics is the old saying, it's like herding cats.
Right.
Everybody's kind of running their own thing, and
Right.
sometimes even groups that agree with each other in principle end up butting against each other
Right.
because they're going about things in a different way.
different egos and different,
This is a really good, at least I hope it is, I think it
Right.
will be, a really good, organized grassroots effort.
Right.
And I think these different grassroots organizations, groups, are fed up enough with what's been going on that they're willing to make a kind of confederation, a loose affiliation, and work together toward a common goal.
At least volunteer, to go out and collect signatures, because essentially that's, and anybody that knows me, I do the Public Disclosure Commission complaints all the time. So this is really, it's driven by, there's 2 PACs involved, but the main PAC, of course, is this Let's Go Washington that's pushing all 11. I think the Restore Washington has 5 of those same ones.
They've taken part that they're championing.
Yeah,
right?
they have, but that's okay, because 2 different groups can push the same, as long as it's the same one, they can push it. But it's really this recognition that in order to be successful in this effort, you have to get a lot of volunteers out there. You either have a ton of money that you can pay a paid signature gatherers, which is what the ACLU is trying to do right now in one of their initiatives, or
make hard drugs legal.
Right. To ensure you have a lot more homeless people.
Yeah, it's not a good idea.
No, it's a horrible idea, but that's what they're doing. They're paying signatures gatherers to do it, and that's perfectly legal in our state. But the more grassroots sort of oriented is where you get volunteers to get out there and collect signatures, like they did with R90 back in the day. In fact, a lot of the same people are it seems like a lot of these same volunteers are coming out together, and a lot of these different patchwork of volunteers willing to work together. And I mean, at least from my perspective, this has been one of the most unifying grassroots, and probably the largest grassroots project that I've ever seen starting to come together, with all these different groups being willing to volunteer. A lot of time, because it's not easy. It's a lot of time to go do this, and it's very exciting that kind of an operation is launching there. I don't think anybody in our state that's in the establishment probably totally is aware of just how significant this is, at least out there in the field, what I'm seeing right now.
It'll change the way that state government works in Washington. Yeah. If this goes like we hope it'll go, it will put the people back in charge.
Right.
They will be that quarterback I'm talking about. And they will lead the state government, they will lead the legislature toward better law, better public policy, better budgets than where it's going now, where a lot of legislators don't listen to the people. They scoff about the people.
Right.
And that's just
in between the
terrible.
lobbyists and the consultant class. I mean, there really does seem to be that thing. So let's talk about some of these ideas that have been put out there. I mean, we don't necessarily have to get into too much detailed specifics, because I think if they want to learn more, go to letsgowashington.com. Those guys they have everything up there. But and that's where I would go if you have specific questions about it. But as observers and volunteers, people who support this kind of an effort, let's talk about some of these ideas, because they're really broken into kind of a public safety category, lower taxes category, and good governance category. It's really
correct. Kind of three groups,
types,
categories. So let's start with the good government. One of the essential things that we need in this state is some clearly defined limit on the emergency powers that the governor has.
Yeah, I hear it all the time. I mean, people are really disgusted with that.
It remains probably the most top of mind issue to most people.
Yeah.
So there is one of these initiatives in this package puts a clearly defined 30-day limit on the governor's emergency powers. So it doesn't take them away.
Right.
The governor still has emergency powers, but they only last 30 days, and there can't be any monkey business to try to extend it. If it needs to be extended, the whole legislature
has to come together,
to be involved and make it come together. So it restores that balance of separation of power between the executive branch, the governor, and the legislature. So that's a top of mind one. There is another initiative in the group that really is a kind of first step toward election integrity review and kind of the audits that a lot of people want to see.
Right.
Now, it's been treacherous ground in our state because our state doesn't have a lot of the definitions in law the way that other states do on what an audit is. Right. And it's always been my concern that because there's no clear definitions, someone could say that a machine recount is an audit and say, hey, look, it passed the audit.
Yeah.
So one of the initiatives clearly defines what is an audit, which is good, and then adds a larger mandatory kind of random sample in every election, whether it's close or not close, of the state's electoral process to make sure that the elections are relatively clean.
And it looked like it's a bipartisan thing where both sides can basically say, listen, I want to look at X number of precincts and do a hand recount on those.
And it makes that a normal thing.
Right.
So it's not only in a contested election.
Right, or massive litigation.
We say it happens in every election.
Right, right.
So, and that, I think, will help rebuild trust.
Which, as somebody who's had both with the Washington Voter Research Project that I've been getting some attention to lately, that all these volunteers, great people canvassing the voter rolls, all the problems that we're seeing out there, but also with a manufacturing background and just that idea of statistical sampling on quality control. I mean, I don't see the insider resistance to this has been
Deming,
absurd.
the famous quality control guru, said you got to be checking all the time.
Right. I mean, it's not a universal solution. You know, the utopia doesn't come down tomorrow with this, but it's at least a step in the right direction. Let's talk about some of the others.
Well, if we talk about public safety, that's next to the emergency powers, probably the top of mind issue for most people right now. One of the key failures in Olympia in the last few years was the failure of the existing legislative group to fix a problem in our law on law enforcement's ability to chase criminal suspects.
And a problem created by the legislature.
The legislature passed a bad law several years ago that made it virtually impossible for frontline law enforcement to chase bad guys.
And it was, so I mean, just to be clear, because this was created by, this actually was a partisanly divided.
Oh, absolutely.
It was 100% Democrats. They decided, let's make it so police can't chase criminals.
I don't know if it was well-intended or badly intended, but it was badly executed, and the result has been horrible.
And we're seeing it all around us right now.
The State Attorney General, Ferguson, has said some very devious things about how, well, the law doesn't do this, it's the bad cops who are saying it does. No, that's not true. The law restricts frontline law enforcement's ability to chase. So we can fix that, and we had bills in Olympia to fix it. And they got close to getting through Olympia because there were enough of a bipartisan support for the reform that it almost made it, but then some of the entrenched establishment killed it at the last minute. State Senator Andy Billig, primarily responsible for doing that. So this initiative fixes that. It restores law enforcement's ability to chase criminal suspects. Easy fix. We should have done it years ago.
And very popular. I mean, this is not, we're not talking about things here that are...
To the extent we even know the polling numbers on this, it's like 80% support, a huge amount of support.
Yeah, it's absurd that we even have to do it as an initiative, but
here we are.
Yeah, and that's where we're at.
Another good one, also fixing a problem, in this case made by the courts, not the legislature. There have been a couple of court decisions, one in particular called the Blake decision out of our state Supreme Court, that has effectively made possession of Schedule I narcotics. Now, we're not talking about marijuana here. We're talking about methamphetamine, heroin, fentanyl. And fentanyl being the
biggest
worst,
killer,
the biggest killer right now. Not a crime. That it's legal to possess these drugs. So we had a bill in Olympia that would have fixed that. It would have added the word, basically the word knowingly to possession, and maintained it as a felony, as in my opinion it should be. That was jammed up by partisans. So this, one of the other initiatives in this package, will restore that knowingly language and make it a felony again to possess methamphetamine, heroin, or fentanyl. And fentanyl has just been a scourge in this state. It's killing kids who are using it because it's more toxic than other drugs. It's enabling human trafficking and a lot of illicit sex underworld stuff happening because of fentanyl and people addicted to fentanyl.
And just a number of people dying, you know, by accidental
Well,
overdoses.
it's a synthetic form of heroin. So people get hooked on heroin and then they take fentanyl because it's cheaper, but it's much more dangerous than heroin, which is pretty dangerous. So it's a horrible thing. And the idea that we've effectively decriminalized this is just horrible. We need to make it a crime again.
And I know there's school curriculum. That's one of
probably back in the good government transparency category. There is an initiative in this group that would require all school districts to post publicly the curriculum that they teach their kids enrolled and course materials to inform families and parents what kids are learning in school.
And so you're not having to file a records request every
No
time.
records
For those
requests.
of my friends out there that we've been doing this for years, but I mean, no records request, it's just there.
They
You can
have to
instantly,
do it
yeah.
by law. They would
Right.
have to make the information available.
Make it easy to download.
Now,
or
I should
visit.
say a handful of school districts, Glenn, do this voluntarily
Yeah.
already, and they're good. That's
Right.
We want to follow their lead.
Right.
This says all the school districts have to do it.
Right.
And then the third category really are the more fiscal ones.
Right.
They have to do with taxes primarily and indirectly some budget issues.
Let's talk about some of those tax ones.
Sure. Probably of a great deal of interest to a great deal of people is an initiative that will put a $250,000 exemption on state property taxes. So the first $250,000 of assessed value of a home you own or a
Right.
piece of land you own or a building doesn't get taxed.
Right.
And then the property tax is calculated for an amount greater than $250,000. This will help older people stay in their homes by lowering their overall property tax burden.
Right.
It's equitable. We talk about equity in Olympia a lot. It flattens out the net effect of how property taxes are burdening different people.
Especially for that portion that the state covers, because I know that's
Right.
as a
Remember
former-
this: when you do your property taxes, some of it's state, some of it's local.
Yeah, other
it's
things,
a
yeah.
mix of different levies.
And so really it's just affecting the state portion, but that's still a big
It's still a
chunk.
significant chunk.
Yeah, and so to take that out, especially for people who live in lower income housing or lower priced housing, that would actually be quite an impact.
And so it would be progressive in that it would get rid of a regressive element of property taxes. It would help poorer people more. And also older people, retired people.
Right.
What I hear about in my area a lot is older people who've retired,
Right.
buy a small cabin or something, and they're living on a fixed income, and they don't want to get taxed out of their nice little cabin.
Right.
And this helps them with that. So that's probably the most important. Now, there are other initiatives in this batch that will have bigger effects on the budgets.
Right.
There's one significantly that cuts the state's overall sales tax, general sales tax, which currently stands at 6.5%,
Right.
to a lower amount. And that is another reform that will help poorer people. Because
Right.
the sales tax is somewhat regressive. I mean, it's flat in that everybody pays the same amount, but it definitely lands heavily on people with less money.
And that was actually, to be fair, that was a Democrat bill that they had put in,
Originally.
but they didn't want to actually pass it.
And some of us liked it.
Right,
So
right.
conservatives liked it.
Right, right.
It was so there was bipartisan support.
I always thought that was funny because it's like the first time I've ever seen the Democrats in recent time propose something that was going to cut the tax. But then at the end of the day, they realized, wait a second, we don't want to take away money from our friends and our bloat and the grifting that goes on in government. And so they couldn't even, in a completely dominated Democrat-controlled legislature and government, they didn't even want to
It
censor
was their idea.
Yeah.
I think one of the troubles was, Glenn, people like me agreed with it too quickly.
Right,
We're
right,
like, yeah,
right.
that's a good idea.
Right,
And they're
right,
like, well, wait
right.
a minute. If Walsh agrees with us, there must be something wrong
So
with this idea.
there we go. Let's put it through. I mean, it's appropriate to put it through in this way.
It's
Now,
a tax break for people. And lastly, we got to mention too, a more specific targeted sales tax on gasoline and diesel fuel.
Right.
Cuts that, not completely out, but cuts it by about half.
yeah, 50% cut.
And it won't be as big a step as, frankly, I and some people like to see, but it's a good start, and it would definitely take a big chunk out of what you're paying at the pump
Right.
now, and that's a good thing.
And that's about
necessary.
24 cents a gallon less.
Right,
based
right
on
off the
that.
bat.
Right off the
And-
bat. I mean, that's going to affect it. Listen, anybody out there driving right now, commuting or doing anything, it certainly doesn't bring utopia tomorrow, but it does reduce the amount you pay every week anyway.
And it's a good deal.
Yeah.
And we've also structured that one so it doesn't negatively impact the transportation budget. The money that we aren't collecting, that 25 cents a gallon people get back,
Right.
that is, they call it backfilling, that is covered by resources from other parts of the budget. So if you hear someone saying if you cut the gas tax, roads are going to fall apart, no, we've covered the effect of that cut.
And then I know there's one in there that also eliminates the capital gains tax, the income tax. It's
And that one hasn't fully really taken effect yet. It's
Right.
just in the earliest stages.
Right.
So that's not so much taking away current money to the state,
right.
but it is money that some of the people on the left already have spent, basically.
Right.
So, but in real budget terms, it hasn't started contributing yet, so nothing is lost.
So when you look at all these, I mean, these aren't radical ideas, right? These are things that I think if you were to survey average people out there, they'd say they would like him. I mean, it's not a partisan thing. I mean, you have to be an incredibly left-leaning partisan to oppose most of these.
No,
ideas.
some of the ideas we've said actually started out as Democrat ideas.
Some of them did. Yeah,
we're like, yeah, that's pretty good. We'll take it.
Yeah, let's go. And so, but there's still a fairly significant impact with getting these out there. And I'm going to just encourage you to, if you're watching this video, go down below, go to it's a PAC that's set up that'll have a lot more detail than what we're going through here. And you can read about it at letsgowashington.com. You'll see it. It's linked down below. Just go there. They'll have a lot more detail on that site because it's their project. They're launching it. And
they're the one hurting the cats.
They're the one hurting. Yeah, I mean, many people are going to volunteer. I like this idea so much. I know I'm going to be volunteering as much extra time as I can while I'm out there because this is just right up my alley. It's a grassroots effort, and I love this kind of holding them accountable. Now let's talk about some budget issues because inevitably this will be the pushback that's coming down the road. Is here we got a number of these different tax cuts and government. There's no greed worse than government greed. This is a phrase I've often I feel all the time when you're around Olympia as much as I am, and I know you see it too. The grifters are going to come out of the woodwork saying that they don't get their cut or whatever they want.
Well, then we'll never admit that. They'll say it's going to hurt the kids,
right.
But really what it's going to hurt is their cut.
So clearly what the Republicans have to do going into this next legislative session, if it looks like you plan to win if you're going to run for office and winners plan to govern if you're going to go in there, they really should be working ahead of time on those budgets so they can show here's the budget that would operate here with billions less than what we're currently squandering today. And knowing how many billions they squander all the time, not just the money they lose in Nigerian fraud schemes, but just the money that they waste all the time on stuff, I imagine that's probably going to be a big discussion, at least behind the scenes, as the caucus Republicans start to look at, hey, we might be in charge. Maybe we better plan to have a plan.
No, that's true. I should say that the initiatives we have in this package all specifically state that they do not detract monies currently collected from essential services.
Right.
So they don't affect workers' comp, they don't affect paid family leave, they don't affect those essential services of the state government. And there is explicit language in them saying that they do not do this.
And the reason why you do this is that, of course, the nature is whenever somebody takes just this little baby step towards cutting the budget a little bit, if you have a Governor Inslee in there, the first thing he's going to do is he'll actively work to try to harm average.
The most important
services.
I
mean, that's just, it's like a reflexive thing that a Democrat governor, especially Inslee with his profile and the people surrounding him, that's what they'll try to do.
He admits that he inflicts pain on the people of Washington. He had this stumbling press conference recently where he tried to say that oil companies were inflicting pain on the people. But then there was a Freudian slip, and he actually said that was his position to inflict pain on people. And he didn't mean to say it, but that.
But you can see that's what they do, right? So their first thing is going to say, how can we hurt kids? How can we hurt the most vulnerable people the most, so that we can blame you darn taxpayers, and voters for collecting signatures and forcing us to cut our budget. So what you're saying is a lot of this is just an effort to try to head that off. And then, of course,
anticipate the attacks.
Right. Because
and the criticisms.
Right.
We can do the tax reforms in this package of initiatives is structured to not negatively affect the good services that the state provides.
Right.
It basically is a gentle way to force the state in the budgetary process in Olympia to cut the fat. And there is fat in the state government.
Lots of fat.
No doubt.
Yeah.
As many viewers know, the overall size of the state's budget in Washington has nearly doubled in less than 10 years. That's faster than the economic growth of the state, faster than median household income, faster than any of the
even Biden's
metrics.
Inflation.
Even in inflation, certainly.
Yeah.
Well, up till now, inflation's getting pretty high.
Yeah.
So what effectively, in a sort of gentle way, these reforms do, is they nudge the state government to cut some of that fat, that end stage growth that they've had, and get back onto a track that might even allow some growth in Olympian government, but more in line with the actual growth of the state's economy and median incomes and how the people are doing. The government shouldn't grow faster than the people's own household incomes are growing.
Right, right.
And it gets it back in line with that. So if there's a bunch of drama and crying and wailing, it's false. All this does is it moves the state government back in line with what regular people have been experiencing in the last decade.
And after all, it is the people's money in the first place, and I don't think government spends it better than we do. So, you know, and I don't think most people feel that way. Well, with that, I think this is probably one of the first videos that's going to be out there, most likely discussing this topic. So there may be a few changes between even our little conversation here when we really see it hit the media or whatever that means. You know, we're out there. So I think we'll close this now. Thank you so much for coming in here, Jim, and talking about this subject. It's very grassroots oriented. It's wonkish. It's kind of an insider thing, but at the end of the day, it's going to be about the people's ability to go out and collect the signatures. And
all political power is inherent in the people. That's
right.
what our state constitution says, and that's what this project will do.
And this is going to be quite a project. So as a grassroots guy, I love this. If you want to learn more about what we've discussed here, just go down below. I should have a lot of source links down there, and you'll see some of the groups that are involved in it. Let's Go Washington for sure, but also Restore Washington. I'll have a link to their website and other details down below. Most of those, it should be able to help you get a lot more information if you want to get involved or be engaged in that process, or if you want to learn more. Otherwise, like anything else, I'm going to close this video with the same thing. I cannot emphasize this enough, because when we're talking about a project like this, the future absolutely does belong to those who show up. And if you want to make these ideas happen, you're going to have to show up and do a lot of work out there, and you will not be alone. So thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, and feel free to share this video with others if you want to know what's happening in Washington State.